To start recording. Dannielle, Bryan, I'm so happy to meet her. I met her in the flesh just tonight, but we share a lot of mutual friends. Very spiritual, amazing woman in the house tonight. So Dannielle is a teacher and she's a practitioner. She blends shamanic traditions, energetic practices with everyday living. So she has been teaching and working in this field for over 20 years. And she has a beautiful studio in Camas, the Shamanic Twist, which I have seen. I've gone out there. She has beautiful practitioners. They're co-creating amazing things. So treat yourself to something at the Shamanic Twist. And you can work with Dannielle individually, sign up for a workshop, a class. And with all of that said, I'm going to invite Dannielle to the seat to talk to us about energetic understanding of this epic journey. Thank you so much, Dannielle.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, welcome. So tonight our topic is initiation into parenthood, an energetic understanding of this epic journey. So I'm going to be speaking to you as both a parent and as a practitioner of shamanic energy healing that I've been studying for the last 18 years, this path particularly, but health and wellness and working with clients for over 20 years. As Sarah said, I'm the founder of Shamanic Twist Wellness Center and studio in Camas, and I've been teaching personal development tracks and professional training tracks for the last 6 years here in Utah, and have been steeped into this path and really working with understanding ourselves as energetic beings, working with understanding the energetics in intrapersonal relationships with others. And tonight, obviously, we're going to be speaking about that in relationship to our kids and what that relationship is, how it works energetically. We're going to cover energetic cords. We're going to cover how we're enmeshed with our children. And there's healthy enmeshment and there's less healthy enmeshment, and the initiation into parenthood as a whole. And what I want to start with is the word initiation. So that's in our title, right? And what is an initiation? And I know what my personal definition was, but I actually looked it up tonight because I was like, I wonder what the official definition of initiation is. So the official definition of initiation, the action of admitting someone into a secret or obscure society or group, typically with a ritual. How about birth? Yeah. The introduction of someone to a particular activity or skill, parenthood. The action of beginning something, parenthood. Yeah. So the initiation into parenthood, what is that? All three of these sum up that threshold that is crossed. We decide to have a child, to bring a child into the world. And we move from a place of operating, identifying, being engaged with ourselves in one way into a place of having a new identity and engaging with ourselves in another way. That threshold or initiation into parenthood. And when I had my son 19 years ago, I remember, and I was youngish. I mean, I think normal young, I was 25. And I remember having this moment when he was itty bitty and brand new and holding, this is it. I will never not be a parent again. And I will never not be the person who I was without a child. And what I started to recognize in that was that coming into our initiation into parenthood is also a death cycle for us. So, and it's not death in a super negative, heavy, big way, but death cycle in the ending of one way of being and the coming into a new way of being. And this is not something that we talk about necessarily in our culture and in our society. We don't necessarily look at what is it that is taking place? What is it that is taking place when we become a parent for the first time? And there really is a end cycle and a beginning cycle, because we've related with ourselves in a certain way. We had our own rhythms, we had our own cadences, we planned differently, we traveled differently, we connected with our partners and our families in different ways. And in the path that I teach in the medicine wheel classes, we talk a lot about looking at our life history, looking at what we've cultivated, the wisdom that we've cultivated, the life experiences that we've had. And we take with us all that resource, all that wisdom, all those jewels, and we want to integrate them fully as we're being asked to move through our own cycles and seasons. So when we move through these thresholds, when we move through these initiatory places in our life, we recognize like something's changing, right? Initiation, the action of beginning something new is happening. The one way of being is shifting and a new way of being is coming into place. And to honor the cycles and the seasons, to honor the life cycles. And again, death as simply an end of one, beginning of another. And if we look to nature for this same cycle, fall is nature's death cycle, right? And it's beautiful, it's stunning. We love it. We drive around just to look at fall, right? And so why not begin to understand our own cycles and seasons, our own rhythms, and realize this is shifting out of one way of being into another way of being. As a new parent, it's big. It's a big one. By the time you have kid number 2, 3, 4, 5 onward, it keeps changing. It is still an initiation cycle. Yes, you're already a parent, but every time a new one comes in, it changes your relationship to yourself yet again, your relationship with your other children, your relationship with your spouse again, the relationship with the family system as a whole, right? So it's recognizing, okay, it's another initiation into another new way of being. And sometimes I have my opinions when I teach, my little soapbox opinions. And one of those is that I believe in not having open forums where we talk about sometimes the grief process that happens when we become a parent, that it contributes to the tendency for postpartum depression. Not that it's the cause of, but it's a contributing factor. Of course, we know there's all kinds of contributing factors in the postpartum. There's a chemical component, a hormonal component, there's all kinds of pieces. But in the course of my study and in the 20 years of working with clients, I've come to recognize patterns. That's something that happens. For those of you who do client work, you start to see larger overarching patterns within humanity, right? Within a group of people who you work with. And what I've seen is that there's no big place for talking about grieving of self in the initiation into parenthood, because we couch it as it's great, it's beautiful, it's fun, and you should just love it and be excited. And that's in the mix. That's in the mix. Although we all know, most of us understand and realize that becoming a parent has a complexity factor to it, right? And so depending on how we come into becoming a parent, it can be the most exciting, fulfilling thing. And sometimes it can be the scariest thing. And sometimes it was definitely unexpected. And we know all the different facets of that. So depending on where we are, we will have a tendency on the spectrum to go through different phases of grief and recognizing like, wait a minute, this is forever, my life is different. It's not like just getting a new job and knowing you can just leave that job and get another new job. This is a forever deal, right? You will never not be a parent. No matter how old they are and no matter what life circumstances come, you will always be a parent from that moment on. And looking at our own cycles, recognizing that we need to release one way of being solely identified with ourselves, but taking all that wisdom, taking all those jewels, taking all those resources we've cultivated and moving across that threshold into a new place where we bring with us everything we've cultivated and we allow ourselves to evolve into this new expression of who we are. And it's a big deal. And then we go home and now we've got a life, right? and like life goes, we have different levels of comfort. Some of us just slide into it super easy, and some of us don't know what the hell we're doing for a little while. And that's an initiation, right? I remember one of my teachers talking about becoming a parent, and he said, going out and buying all the things you need doesn't make you a parent. Your child makes you a parent, right? And so it's that place of realizing that we're in this together. We now have this mutual relationship with this other, and it's a very unique relationship. And we're going to get into some of the energetic dynamic of what we experience with our kids and why that is. Understanding ourselves as multidimensional beings, as energetic beings, and recognizing that whether you have a biological child or an adopted child, you will actually still enmesh with them. There's a different frequency pattern to it because our biological children's bodies are grown with our genetic material. So once they're out in their own autonomous little body, we're still enmeshed with them because we share a frequency pattern, because we share a DNA enmeshment pattern. It's really fascinating once you start looking at it from this other lens, which then lends itself to that feeling that we have with our kids, like there is no separation for a while, especially infants. And there truly is no separation. Infants actually share your same vibrational field and frequency field. And it's why they can recognize when mom walks out of the room, even as itty bitty little ones. And so they share a field with you until roughly around 6, 7, 8 months, you start to see it change, right? And we recognize this even in our kids. It's like it changes. They begin to have a sense of themselves outside of you. And then it changes again as toddlers, and then it changes again as young school age, and then it changes again as they come into 10, 11, 12, and then drastically changes again in the teenage years, right? And so it's recognizing these cycles and these patterns in the relationship that we have with our children. Any questions so far about what we're
I have a question about frequency. Like what, like I can think of a radio frequency.
Yeah.
But what's like a energetic frequency?
An energetic frequency, that's a great question. So the question is frequency and what is an energetic frequency? So we are, as energetic beings, we all have a vibrational frequency. And the easiest way to describe this is when you are just blissed out and happy, there's a high vibration in your field, right? It's so high, you probably can't even stop moving, right? And you're telling your story about whatever it is. And you're like, ah. It's such a big frequency that it actually is coming out in motion. Mm-hmm. Versus think about a really low vibrational frequency. A sad frequency it's denser, right? You're sad. Sad is more like this, or it's curled up in fetal position, or you can read it on somebody when they walk in the room. Anger is an entirely different frequency, right? And it has a heat to it. literally, there's a heat that emanates out of your body when that frequency is rolling through. So frequencies will lay down in certain patterns. So if you could see with your eyes the different subtle energy bodies, which I'm going to get into in just a minute and explain what those subtle energy bodies are, they all have a geometric pattern. And that geometric pattern has a certain vibrational frequency to it. So have you been to a sound bath before? Mm-hmm. Okay. So sound baths, sound bowls all have a different frequency. They have a hertz that they're tuned to. And so when you play them, you can feel that coming into your field. And the reason you feel different when you leave a sound bath or something like that is because you entrained with a new frequency. So as if you're tuning a guitar, right? And your chords, when they come in tune, there's a certain frequency pattern. And when they're out of tune, there's a dissonance pattern in them. So our field will have the same thing. Have you ever been around somebody that you didn't jive with their energetic vibration? It just felt dissonant and prickly to you to even just be in their presence. Didn't matter what they were saying. That probably followed suit with what the energy was doing, right? So we will entrain or we will repel from certain vibrational patterns or frequency patterns. It's our subtle energy bodies that are picking all of this up. So we, with little kids, little infants, we as the moms particularly, and that's just straight up biology, we just hung out with these guys and grew them in our body for 9 months, right? Fathers will bond with their kids too, and they'll share a frequency pattern as well, but infants will share their same frequency pattern with the mom for those first several months. So you really are like one.
Would that mean like if she was blissed out, would the baby feel that?
Totally.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yep.
And sad too.
And sad too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, we're not really going in this direction. I mean, we can actually, because we're here and we can talk about whatever we want, but it is the same concept of how we can pass energetic trauma patterns down to our kids genetically. So in this work that I do, we do a lot of looking at the genetic storylines and the genetic patterns and the genetic traumas that get passed down through lineage lines, through storylines, and it is passed down through the DNA. And then we can actually develop a resonance with it, and we can be encoded with a trauma that wasn't ours, but we will hold it as a vibrational pattern in our field. So part of my training and what I've cultivated and learned how to do is to see energy patterns. And when I have worked with clients, you can actually see the blockage or the coalesced energy that looks dense in a person's field, and we can learn how to track back to its origination source and where it originated from and where it got laid down, and how to work with clearing that out of somebody's field. So it's understanding, all those pieces. But our makeup of our multidimensional field is our physical body. And then we have the etheric field, which is very close to our physical body. And it's the blueprint or the template of the physical body. So it's like a program, if you will. And it programs the construct of the physical body. Then we have an emotional body, which is just that. It's emotion with no story. It's just emotion. And then we have a mental emotional field, which is emotion with story. And we have a mental intellectual field, which is just thought, no emotion. And then we have the spirit soul field. So we've got these layers of these subtle energy bodies that make up the whole, of our multidimensional field, or another way to talk about it is the vast aura, and or the Akash or the Ka. There's in many different traditions, they will talk about your multidimensional field in different ways. So this field is what is giving us the feedback loop, and the feedback loop for knowing what's going on with our kids, for walking into a room and knowing what has taken place if it's overt. Right? You can walk into a room where there was an argument and you didn't need to hear the argument because you can feel that the argument happened. Mm-hmm. Likewise, you can walk into a room where somebody's been kissing and making out, and you're like, what is going on in here? Because there's a feeling to it, right? You walk in, you're like, there's something happening. And that's your multidimensional field that is picking up on the energetics in the space, because energetics are always rippling out. They're never not rippling out. So with our kids, we are enmeshed with them in this way. It's why we know things. It is intuition, 100% it's intuition, but what is intuition? Intuition is picking up on the thing we can't see that we know because we're getting a feedback loop. The feedback loop is the vibrational frequency or the energetics of what's in play. So here we have these little ones and they come in. It's why in adoption, they cocoon you into the bonding process, right? They want you to spend all kinds of super close interaction with your kids, and different schools of thought on that, but I know quite a few places will say, 1 month, no outside interaction, just kids and parents, because they're trying to lay down the energetic bond that will replicate the natural energetic bond that happens when you have biological children. So they're wanting those fields to entrain. So you're starting to build that process of that deeper connection that happens. So when we're coming into understanding our relationship with our kids, there's all these different phases of how we relate with our children. The infant, it's close. They're with us. And there's that deep connection. And then it starts to shift a little bit. There's a little bit more autonomy. And recognizing this within the growth cycles of our children will help us as parents navigate the different stages in the 18-year child rearing process, is what I would say. That's roughly when societally most of our kids are shepherding off somewhere else. It's the point where we go, ow, and we do the big let go, right? So there's another component of understanding the cycles and stages and how we can navigate it with our kids, and that is through understanding energetic cording. So energetic cords are pretty much exactly what it sounds like. So in our multidimensional field, it is a moving field of living energy. And within that, we have all these strands of light. And one of those strands of light will reach out and plug into another person. And depending on our relationship with that person, they too have one of their strands of light reached out and plugged into us. So now we've got this two-way information system happening. And this just happens. It's just part of us being energetic beings, part of us being in close, intimate relationship with another. We cord to our kids, hands down, all over the place. And we cord typically through the chakra system. So quickly, in case some of you don't know the chakra system, and if some of you do, then great. But we've got these 7 main energy centers that run right up the midline of our body. They look like funnels. They stick out about 2 to 3 inches out of the physical body. And they're these energy vortexes that have a natural cycle of taking energy in and discharging energy out. So typically we will cord to our kids through the second chakra, which is a very biological chakra. And it is creativity, it's power, it's support, it's understanding. It is related to the womb in women. We will also cord through the heart chakra, obviously, but we will have a tendency to cord through the third chakra, which is our place of judgment, worries, insecurities. Fear will pop up. Fear also pops up in the root chakra a lot. But what I've seen over and over and over in this work is that it's 2, 3, and 4 typically, unless we have a really big fear program running. Then we'll see it in the root chakra. But what happens is this line of light moves out and plugs into our kids. And a line of light from our kids leaves their body and plugs into us. And for a while, this is ultra necessary. It is the way in which we are enveloping our children and taking care of them. And I talk about the biology of keep offspring alive. And it's this hardwired thing that we all have as parents. It runs its course differently between moms and dads, but every parent has it. The biology of keep offspring alive. We're hardwired for it. It's like #1 job, right? And so we begin to cord and enmesh with our kid, and our job is to make sure that they are safe and alive at this like really basic level. What we want to recognize is that as they continue to grow up, as they're growing into their own autonomous self, that there are stages and phases where it is most beneficial for both us as the parent and the child to dissolve and unplug the way those cords have been laid down, clear them out of the space between, and allow for the new engagement and the new stage to begin to take place. And the easiest example for this is recognizing that the 5-year-old doesn't need to be parented in the same way that the 2-year-old needs to be parented. And the 10-year-old doesn't need to be parented the way a 5-year-old. And the 14-year-old doesn't need to be parented like a 5-year-old, right? And we want our relationships to evolve. We want to grow into having healthy adult relationships with our kids. And I see a lot of patterns where 40-year-olds still are in a power struggle with their parents, and they are still seen and treated as a child, even though they're 40. And it creates dissonance in the parental-child relationship because the relationship hasn't been allowed to evolve into its current healthiest expression. What happens in those energetic cords is, think about it as information loops. Like those old school, like you had 2 cans and a string, like telephones, right? So it's this information string. And what can happen is an old pattern can get laid down, and whenever we find ourselves in a situation where that thing gets triggered, everybody defaults into that old pattern. And so the minute we get triggered with our 17-year-old and we go into biology of keep offspring alive and we go into fear, we begin to treat them like a 5-year-old, which is not necessarily what their soul is asking for in terms of engagement. So recognizing and understanding that we will have these cords with our kids, can we have enough self-awareness around recognizing like, oh, this is a new phase, this is a new stage. And the way we can literally do this, it's quite a simple process, as long as it doesn't have a whole lot of charge around it. And the simple process is truly to trust your own innate wisdom, to recognize you have something going on that needs to shift and change, evolve. You can close your eyes. You can picture in your mind's eye, use your imagination, your children sitting in front of you. And you begin to ask yourself the question, if I had a cord to them, where is it? And the first thing that comes up is the right thing. Everybody has the ability to do this. It's actually just trusting yourself when the answer pings, instead of second guessing it and thinking you don't know how to do it, because you're well versed in your own energetic anatomy. You may not have language around it, but everybody's well versed in their energetic anatomy. Once you realize where it is in your body, you literally just unplug it. You grab onto it and you unplug it, and you let the energy between you and your child dissipate. And you recall back home to you your cord of light that's plugged into your son or your daughter, and you pull that back to you, and you let the space begin to clear. Now, this is not going to disassociate you from your children. That's the biggest number one thing when I'm working with clients and something comes up and we start talking about cords with the kids and they need to be dissolved to allow for this new relationship. Right away, it's like, I don't want to be disconnected from my kids. And it's not a disconnection from your kids. What it's doing is saying this one way of engagement is ready to be released. It's the way that we've held them in a certain way, the way that we have a pattern with them, the way that we can hold conditions that way. So I worked with a mom and a son, and her son had been having seizures from the time he was, I think, in second grade, and he was in seventh or eighth grade at the time that he stopped having seizures. But we worked for about 1.5 years together. And he was working on becoming seizure-free, changing diet, doing all kinds of things, working with his doctors. And then we were doing the energetic component to assist him in his process. And there came a point after working with him for about 1.5 years where he was seizure-free. And we all recognized it. He recognized it as a 13-year-old. She recognized it as the mom. And we realized we have to do a ceremony to recognize that this is a threshold and you two need to let your relationship change. Because for all those years, the engagement was mom was worried about son, and son was worried about how mom was worried about son. And mom saw son as having this big health condition where he was told he would never drive. He couldn't play football. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. And so their relationship dynamic was one that was totally held around the condition. Mm-hmm. And when that changed, we had to do, well, we didn't have to, but we chose to do a big ceremony of dissolving all the cords between the two of them so that all of that patterning could be released, so they could actually come into a whole new way that they saw each other and related with each other. So that she didn't default into an unconscious place of only seeing her son through this lens, even though he didn't have seizures anymore. Because energetically, that's what can happen. It's not always what happens, but it's what can happen, especially if it's been laid down with so much emotion behind it. Right? So recognizing that we can move through and assist the relationship that we have with our children through recognizing what our energetic enmeshment is with them. And when it's time to allow one way of being together to be released and let go. These are the mini life, death, life cycles. right? We're all parents here, yes, and some of you are brand new parents, so maybe you haven't hit kindergarten yet, but that's a whole new phase, right? It's always so like, oh no. I mean, it's great, and sometimes it's like sad and celebratory, like off you go, yay, and sad all at the same time. It's complex, right? It's the celebration of new and a little bit of freedom for us, and a grieving process for what is no longer the way it was. And understanding that we can consciously work with it, and understanding that we actually have a energetic pattern laid down that we can consciously work with and bring a shift to it to assist us in saying, yeah, you know, it is different. And it doesn't mean don't be sad. It means, yeah, feel your feelings and know that we can work with allowing the evolution of the relationship to happen. I had another client who I was working with who was in his mid-20s, and he had whatever dynamic he had with his family and his parents, and he felt like he was caught in the kid role. Like he couldn't move through that threshold and develop an adult relationship within the family system. So in his mid-20s, we did a whole ceremony where I went to the house. His grandma happened to be in town, his stepdad, his sister, the two sisters, his mom, and his dad couldn't be there, but we had him there represented there. And we did a whole ceremony of dissolving all those cords of attachment to each family member in turn, and released the whole thing of how they held him and saw him, and how he felt bound into one way of being within the family system. And the entire system came into a new relationship. So it wasn't just between two people, it was the entire family system, which is also a beautiful ceremony to do with our kids when they're moving into their puberty phase. And we have lost this in our culture. There are many cultures who still do the honoring of the transition through puberty. And we don't have something necessarily that is traditional for us. It has gotten lost. And so in a lot of the work that I do with clients is we work with how to become practitioners of the sacred again, to remember that we're practitioners of the sacred, to remember that we can create these initiation ceremonies, and it can just be in our living room with yarn and scissors. That's what we did with him. We had yarn that represented the cord from him to his mom, and then the cord from his mom to him. And he cut his and she cut hers. And it was the ceremonial representation of realizing, like, we are going to be in a new engagement now. And in the end, he said, this is how I want you to treat me. This is what I'm asking for in terms of how you view me. This is the kind of relationship I want. And I was like, right on. Like, that was kind of off the cuff. It wasn't necessarily planned and part of what we were doing in that evening. But it's like there was this liberation, and he could actually ask for the kind of engagement that he wanted. So it's really, really powerful when we begin to understand what that relationship is that's happening with our kids, that is happening on that energetic level. It's beyond just our everyday cognitive interaction with them. But it's also why we feel their pain, right? When our kids are going through something hard, like it hurts, we just want to get in there and fix it, right? We're like, I just want the hurt to go away. Can I fix it? And we all know that most of the time, no. We can support, we can love, we can be there, we can advise, we can do all kinds of things, but we can't We can't reach in and just pluck it away, make it go away. But that's the instinct. That's what that's our first reaction, right? But what we can do, even in like that example, is to understand, oh, this pain that I'm feeling is their pain, and I can be empathetic, and we can work with being able to dissipate this. And how do you, as the mom or the dad, not actually take that on, absorb it into your own field, and then try to process it out? Because the real deal is you can't do it that way. You will absorb it and you will carry it, and it will begin to manifest as something different in your own field. And this is where we see people lose themselves in certain situations, and they become completely identified with their kids, and it's really hard to find autonomy, and it's hard to show up and be recognize the support that they may need without it driving from our own personal lens. This is where we start to really tease out the nuance of what the energetic relationship is with our kids. And it's tricky. It's hard. This is not just like, oh, I mean, now that I know that, I'm just going to apply it. It's like practice over and over, recognizing those places. Any questions so far on anything that we're talking about, or comments, or your own stories?
I have a question. What's an example of dissipating the pain?
Mm-hmm.
Because that lands with me.
We can assist them in being self-referencing and how to release the energy themselves. So if we can make the practice for ourselves, if we can make the practice for understanding that, there's ways that we can work with our energetic fields that have density that's laying down in it, which is the pain points, right? And there's ways that we can work with our chakras. I mean, there's all kinds of practitioners, the kind of healing work that we practice at Shamanic Twist Wellness Center is rooted in the shamanic path and the Andean traditions and looking at energy and energy patterns. But that's one of a million different ways that you can work with different kinds of things. So if you understand how do you be able to let go of energy, one way is you can literally unwind it out of your field. So you can just feel in your body where you are feeling the pain or the density or the intensity, right? You can use your hands, drop right into that area in your body, and you make circles to your right shoulder. And that's a discharge or a dissipating of energy. And we drop it down to the earth, and she loves it. She takes what doesn't work for us and she mulches it and she turns it into fertilizer. Yeah, we know this in gardening. So you can unwind it and flick it down to the earth, and then you can rebalance. And it's amazing how much density you can shift simply by assisting the energy to release. So with our kids, if we're taking on their pain and we realize it, we can say, I cannot internalize this. I recognize I'm taking it on. It's just part of the package deal of being a parent. It's not to get ourselves to a point where we're doing this and we're like, none, I'm not taking on any of your stuff. It's not that. It's just recognize, yeah, it's gonna happen. And when it does, can you help to release it? And if you can do that for yourself, you can also teach your children that they can do it for themselves. And to start to have the conversation to help them to realize that they're energetic beings, possibly, if that resonates with you. Or not, if it doesn't, if you don't want to have that conversation with your kids. I mean, that's how Zach was raised. He understood certain things, and it just was part and parcel of the environment in which he grew up in, because I did what I do. And so that was how it was. And so with him, I talked a lot about energetic cords. As he got older, he started having girlfriends and friends and different things. And when those things would change, and it causes that pain that we watch our kids go through, I would say, bud, you got to release the cords that you have attached to this person, and you have to let the relationship shift and evolve and begin to unwind and release and let go of the density that you're holding. And it resonated with him. One day, I think he was 14 or 15. He came home and he goes, Mom, can I bring all my friends over and you can teach them about chakras and do a session on them? And I was like, yes and no. Yes, they can come over and I can talk about energy. And no, I'm not doing 5 sessions tonight on all your friends. But so, it's when they start to understand it. And I've worked with a lot of adolescents, and actually Shamanic Twist this summer is launching a youth and adolescent program to help kids remember this, because our little kids are so tuned in and they see things, know things, hear things. And then the veil starts to come down with a little bit of conditioning. And, if we can keep that wide open for them, there's this remembering of the natural state. And what I've seen happen in our adolescents is exactly what we're talking about. They're very empathetic, our kids these days, super, super in tune, and they feel everything. And they feel something, they're not sure exactly what it is, they internalize it, and then they try to process it out. But they're trying to process something that's not even theirs. And it can become very overwhelming. And kids who are very sensitive start to struggle in being in environments that are just chaotic or loud or lots of kids or different kinds of things like that. There's a spectrum in there of sensitivity, but I think working with our kids, even little kids, I worked with this little boy since he was 4. He's 6, 7 now. And his parents got divorced when he was 2, I think. And, mom's house, dad's house were very different environments. And he struggled with the transition of going from one back to the other. Really sensitive kid. And I worked with his mom. His mom was also a client. And we worked with setting up, I helped her to find a ritual that worked for her and her son. And whenever he came home from dad's house, they lit some Palo Santos, which is like sage. And he would Palo Santos himself and go around the house. And he had his favorite crystal, and he would take a bath at night, and he would unwind energy from his field. And it was the welcoming back into the new environment. And now as a 7-year-old, he just does this. This is now natural for him. He comes home, he goes right to the Palo Santos, he does it. Or if they forget, sometimes he'll be like, Mom, we didn't Palo Santos. And so he knows that it just makes him feel better. Right. And so our little ones know. He went through a point where he was kind of nervous about things and new things were starting. And one day he said to his mom, I think we need to go outside and put our bare feet on Pachamama. That's what we call Mother Earth in this path. We call her Pachamama. We need to put our bare feet on Pachamama. And we just need to absorb the energy and just relax, because everything's going to be fine. Right? So they know, because they can feel it. They can understand it. And as parents, we're gonna do things, we're gonna nail it, and we're gonna mess it up. And I think being able to talk with our kids and say, let's just clear this out. How do we dissipate? Let's just clear this out. Let's start over. With little kids, you can just, have them like rub it off. We don't have to get into what's a chakra and what's your multidimensional energy body doing. You can, but we can keep it really just fun, light, playful, understand what's going on, and know that your kids are going to respond super fast. They're not coming in with 40 years of baggage. They can move things really, really quickly. So it's beginning to understand that component in there with our kids can change the way we can navigate the child rearing process. So, any questions from Zoomers? No? All right. Any other questions?
I mean, I want to have a whole discussion. I would say one thing is for our participants, a lot of them have kids who are younger. So we've talked about, different stages, older kids, which is helpful for me. But a lot of times we've also talked about with even toddlers or adolescent kids who are verbal and teaching them things. What about with infants or kids who are nonverbal? And do you do it to them? Because a lot of the techniques we've talked about, they're doing it to themselves.
Yeah.
So is that helpful to do as well?
Yeah, you can. I mean, that's where it starts.
Right.
Really, in infancy, it starts with helping the energy to move. If you have an upset baby who's not being consoled very well, you can begin to use any one hand, does not matter, and you can start to peel energy out of their field and trust yourself, trust what you're doing. You'll actually feel it, and you'll do it as many times until it feels complete. And what you're doing is you're helping the little one to discharge whatever is not laying down in their field in a way that is causing the discomfort, right? And you can continue to do that and work with them through little itty bitty infancy all the way through, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months, like the nonverbal stages, and create bath time to also be a time where you're helping them and you're just clearing it. And we know that our kids are listening to us even pre-verbal. So we can be even talking if we want. I mean, if it feels right and normal, like we're just going to let that go. We're going to clear this out of our fields, and maybe not when they're little infants, but when you're dealing with a 1-year-old, 1.5, 2-year-old, you can start to say those kinds of things. And they are experiencing it. They are actually having a visceral cellular experience, and they will remember it as they grow older. And now there's more cognitive understanding of it. Like, we used to do this at bedtime, remember? It's like, oh yeah, we did. I liked that, or whatever it is. So we do it to them in those phases and assist them. And then at the point where they can start to understand and do it for themselves, and they can self-soothe in that way. My sister's youngest, I think he was 3, and she taught him how to self-soothe. And when he was really upset, and how kids get in that loop and they can't talk, right? And so she would say, Hudson, she said, put your hand on your heart and your other hand on your belly and take 3 deep breaths and just let all the energy go down to the earth. And he would do that. And then as he got a little bit older, he would just do that for himself. And he knew that that was a reset in his field. That would help him to calm down. He got to feel his feelings. It wasn't about like, get over it. It's like, feel your feelings, but let's move out of this loop that you're in and come back to a place of center. Now let's talk about what it is that's happening, what's going on. But she would do that with him as a young one, pre-verbal, and then grew up and started to understand it.
So
Yeah.
I think that that's going to be it. I'm going to just come on and say thank you. Oh, what a treat. And we will send out this recording and we'll share Dannielle's contact information if you'd like to work with her. And I'm so grateful. This was such an amazing talk. So thank you all for being here. I wish you a beautiful night. Happy January. And we hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.